Hello and welcome to the Measure of Whisky, where we discuss all things Scotch whisky. This week, part 2 of the food pairing series. This time around we're going to look at foods that pair well with peated whisky.
Friday and the race is on. The city's gonna be a mess.
Okay, so if you haven't seen part 1, I'll leave a link below here so you can jump on and take a look. Part 1 was interested in non-peated whiskies, foods that pair well with that. Today we are going to focus on peated single malt Scotch whisky, and I'm going to give you some suggestions of food pairings for these drams. And I should mention, we're not looking to pair a full meal with our whisky at the moment. We're just looking at nibbles, the type of thing that you may have out on your countertop when you've got friends over and you're drinking some whisky. Right, before we go any further, I want to share with you what we have on today's platter. Of course, we have some Scottish oat cakes. If you're not sure what an oat cake is and you didn't watch episode 1, oat cakes are probably very similar to eating cardboard. They're very bland, they're very boring, and that's the beauty of a Scottish oat cake. You don't taste the oat cake, you taste what's on top of the oat cake. But when you're drinking whiskey and you just want something to nibble, it's great because it doesn't do anything to adjust or taint the flavour of your dram. So it's just perfect, it's nice and dry as well. We have some roasted and salted macadamia nuts. We've got some green olives, pitted green olives. We have some Gouda cheese, or Gouda, if there's any Dutch people watching. And we have some smoked salmon. We're going to start proceedings with our first dram of the night, which is a Highland Park 15. Love the bottle here. Bottled at 44% ABV. Lovely, really kind of finesse on the nose. The smoke element in this is very light, and I should briefly mention that all of these single malts that we're drinking are peated. If you're unsure what that means, I definitely have a video on what is a peated whisky. I don't want to spend too much time on that, but briefly I will go into a little bit of detail on how much peat is in each one of these individual whiskies. That's measured by phenolic parts per million, or ppm. Essentially, the higher the level of ppm, the more peat that basically is infused into the barley, which then comes out on the nose and in the taste and in the finish when you're drinking a peated whisky. Highland Park is known for having lightly peated Scotch whiskies. The ppm of this is around about 15 to 20, so it's subtle, it's nice, it's delicate. It really is. It's just a hint of smoke on the back end. Very, very nice. Now, I am going to suggest we pair the Highland Park with the macadamia nuts. The important thing here is the nuts are roasted and salted. Doesn't matter what type of nut it is. If you're pairing nuts with Scotch whisky, make sure that it is roasted nuts and there's an element of salt in them as well. The macadamia nuts are just fantastic. I find that the roasted element just works in real harmony with the light level of smokiness that's in this dram. It's just fantastic. On top of that, macadamia nuts, after you eat a few of them, they have a little bit of a creamy texture to them, and it elevates the dram. Remember, make sure the nuts don't have any additional flavours added to them. We don't want to overpower the whisky. That's really important. This is the star of the show, as always. These are accompaniments. Also, the salt factor, what that does, well, nuts of any sort and alcohol are a match made in heaven. Everybody knows that, right? The salt in the macadamia nuts actually really helps to reduce the aggressiveness of the whisky. I know a lot of people aren't overly enthusiastic about peated whiskies, but the salt layer, it just kind of rounds it off a bit and makes it much more approachable. Now, the good news is I have tested all these drams with all these food pairings, so you don't have to sit and watch me eat and drink in front of you. Trust me, it works. So I'm going to go for some macadamia nuts and a Highland Park 15. Cheers. Right, next on the list we have a Bowmore 12. Not an awful lot left in this bottle. With regards to ppm, how peated is a Bowmore 12? Very similar to the Highland Park. It's lightly peated, somewhere around that 15 to 20 ppm mark. It just means that it is elegant, it's not aggressive, it's really easy going. Bowmore's a whisky that surprised me pleasantly, actually. I never drank a lot of Bowmore until a couple of years ago, and I've had a number of different expressions from them. It's a very light, approachable whisky, but it has a lot of layers to it. You know, the Bowmore 12, for example, lightly peated, it's nice and rounded, but it has that soft edge of smoke on it, let's call it that. Great dram. My suggestion is Bowmore 12 with green olives. As per the macadamia nuts, there's nothing added with regards to flavours. They're not stuffed with garlic or chilies. That's very important because that could really ruin your taste experience of the whisky. But a fantastic pairing. Again, they're briny, they're salty, so you're going to have that same effect. It's going to really polish off the edge of the smoke. It's going to make it even more approachable than it already is. The other really great thing about these olives, they have a slight bitterness to them. And eating the bitterness, taking that from the olives and mixing it with the peat in the whisky has an incredible effect on it. It really emphasises the smoke layer. It kind of brings it to the top, but at the same time it doesn't overpower. So this is a great combination. The other great thing about these green olives is they act as a bit of a palate cleanser. Between drams is great, but between different whiskies, if you're trying different expressions, eating a couple of those olives really refreshes your mouth and refreshes your palate and sets you up for the next dram. Good combination. Next on our list of drams, we have something a little bit more robust, and by a little bit I mean enormously more robust. A Laphroaig triple wood. Not too much left in this bottle either. This is relatively hardcore when it comes to peated whisky. Any Laphroaig normally is. Definitely not for the faint-hearted. You know, not for those who are just starting their journey on peated Scotch whisky. Yeah, but it's a fantastic dram. Okay, I am suggesting Laphroaig triple wood with the Gouda cheese, or the Gouda cheese. Fantastic combination for a number of different reasons. First and foremost, any smoked cheese, this is smoked Gouda, right? So you pick that up and you smell the smokiness of the cheese. It's wonderful, it's absolutely fantastic. So you're immediately going to complement the smoky element of the whisky with the cheese, so that's a great start. The other great thing about this cheese, and many other smoked cheeses as well of course, they're creamy in texture, and that really transfers across to the dram. It rounds off the edges of that harshness, it brings it down a couple of levels and makes it much more palatable. The other thing is the majority of smoked cheese has its own layers of complexity. It's gone through somewhat of a process, not quite similar to peated Scotch whisky, but it's gone through a process to make it smoked. So you've got lots of different layers of complexity in that. Again, it just complements with the whisky on a new level. It's amazing, definitely worth trying. Last, but certainly not least on tonight's list, we have a Talisker. So I've got a Talisker 10 here. Fantastic whisky. It's bottled at 45.8%, so you know, relatively easy going. It's certainly not cask strength, it's not overpowering in that nature, and it's just a fantastic whisky. Obviously you know what we're going to pair this with, the smoked salmon. Why would smoked salmon and Talisker whisky not work? That's really the question. Of course it does. You know, the tasting notes of any of the Taliskers have that element of brine, sea salt, you know, just purely based on the location of the distillery. It's in the Isle of Skye, it's getting battered with all those storms. As this whisky is maturing, it's absorbing all that sea salt and all that brininess. And you can really tell right from the nose. It's unbelievable. It's just super fresh. It's fantastic. And then you get that level of smoke, that peated smoke coming right through it. Now with regards to ppm, this sits around 35. So somewhere in between the Highland Park, the Bowmore, and the Laphroaig right up at the top there, around 40 to 50. This is 35, so it is a little bit more smoky than the first two we looked at, but it really doesn't transfer that way. It's not aggressive at all. On the nose, it's just it's delightful. It's fantastic. What an absolute perfect combination, smoked salmon and Talisker whiskey. The beauty of smoked salmon, of course, is it is light. It's not overpowering. It's not going to taint or kill the flavour of the whiskey, which is great. The other important factor, of course, is that it's smoked, so it has layers of complexity to it. It just works harmoniously with pretty much any peated whiskies, but most of the ones that are on the coast, the island peated whiskies. And it does add a little bit of sophistication to your nibbles as well, so it's got that going for it too. Now, smoked salmon is not the only creature of the sea that works fantastically well with peated Scotch whisky. Oysters, clams, mussels, all of these shellfish and various different types of seafood work incredibly well with peated Scotch whiskies, as long as they are not overpowered with different flavours. If there's too much chilli, if there's too much Tabasco or garlic, you know, I'm not going to say don't do it. It will still be fantastic, but it will have quite a dramatic effect on the whiskey itself. Before I let you go, I have a question for everybody. A friend of mine who really does enjoy peated Scotch whisky swears to me that the best combination he's ever had is a beef vindaloo Indian curry and an Ardbeg. One of the most heavily peated scotches on the market. Have you ever tried that? Have you ever tried a very, very spicy Indian curry with a peated Scotch whisky? I've just told you, don't do it, right? I could be completely wrong. It's definitely part of my homework. I'm going to give it a shot. I'm going to try it. Have you tried it? Is it good? Let me know. Until next time, I'm off to enjoy my platter of food and my whiskies. Slange.